I'm Sarah Jackson, host of Internal Comms Pro, the podcast, a listening experience choreographed to help you elevate your internal communications to the pro level.
It's also been one of the most exciting times to be in internal communications because we're being looked at like never before. If your employees all have smartphones, the whole world does now. And so if you're not meeting the same kind of experience that they're getting on their other apps that they use personally, you're not going to get nearly the kind of effectiveness of your employee app. And if you fail to really engage your audience in it before you make these massive changes, you run the risk of making some really big mistakes. If you're a communicator and you know you have a problem, consider a technology roadmap, not a magic bullet.
That's Stephen Jones, Senior Manager of Operations Communications at United Airlines, and our new pilot that is going to help us navigate the new age of internal communications. You know, our industry continues to quickly evolve and innovate to meet our employees' demand to provide a consumer-grade employee experience. But how do we get there? What are the pieces to this new channel strategy puzzle that will ultimately provide employee readiness for our frontline workers? Well, today, Stephen shares how his push-pull comms strategy took flight. And finally, he teaches us how to build a technology roadmap that will take your channel strategy to new heights.
Hi, my name is Stephen Jones, and I'm a Senior Manager of Operations Communications at United Airlines.
Well, today we're going to be talking and uncovering some tips and plans and strategies for innovating your internal comms digital strategy to reach a diverse remote workforce. So I can't wait to get into all that today. But before we jump in, Stephen, if you wouldn't mind, I'm going to start with the most important question. So, how fast did you watch the Cobra Kai series? Because I hear
Well,
you're a fan.
yes, I'm a fan. I will tell you, I binge watched season 1 and 2 as soon as they were on Netflix. I've taken my time a little bit with season 3. I'm about halfway through.
Oh, all right. And did you have a crush like all the other guys in the world on Elizabeth Shue when you were growing up?
Well, absolutely, it's just kind of the way it works.
So tell us, how did you get into this crazy world of internal communications? What's your backstory on this?
Well, I think the way I entered into internal communications was a happy accident. I think that might be the case for a lot of professional communicators. When I graduated with that degree, I actually already had a job in sales, and so I was kind of deep into wireless sales at the time, and I did that for several years. And then there was a new team being created here in Chicago, where I live now, the Strategic Sales and Marketing Communication Team at US Cellular. And I had the background in sales. I had the background in marketing. The overall goal was to get this marketing content to the sales organization so that they could better sell and be knowledgeable about the company. And there was a leader who I still keep in contact with to this day named Shelly Pluta that took a chance on me and relocated me to Chicago, where I had the opportunity to build a brand new team. And that's really when I kind of fell in love with internal communication, employee readiness. That led me to lead the content and communication strategy for the operations side of it. And I did that for several years. And then I stepped away from communication for a couple of years. I ended up in app development in the innovation side. And it was what we call a start-in. It was a startup company within a corporation where we did everything from building a new business to getting users to running marketing campaigns, running social. I left US Cellular, ended up at United, where I had the opportunity to. They had just gone through a reorg on the communication side, brought in all these communicators from different parts of the organization, and really we're looking at a way to centralize the strategy and really make this one cohesive team. And so that was an incredible experience to get the opportunity to come in and work collaboratively with all these communicators to find best practices to reach our audience. And so that's kind of where I'm at now. So basically, on the operations communication side, we're tasked with getting the right information to the people that really create the customer experience in our company. So that's our flight attendants. That's people that work in the airports. That's people that work underneath the wings and put the bags in, the people that answer the phones. And then it's even the people that make the food in the kitchens for the planes or fix the planes. And so there's a lot of diversity in our work group, and it's exciting. It's an exciting area of communication to be in to keep those folks informed about the company.
We always survey our listeners and ask them, okay, what do you want to hear about this season? And they now are in the thick of it. They've got these large, diverse remote workforces. There's so many different types of roles that people are playing, and they're struggling with figuring out, all right, we've got information. How do we get this to all of these folks, in a way that makes them feel connected to our organization. So I'm excited to talk about that today. And the other thing they've requested, which is I love hearing you talk about all the different roles you've played outside of internal comms, because that they're thinking, hey, we want some more folks maybe outside our industry. We're afraid there might be a groupthink kind of situation going on. So I'm grateful that you're here to kind of share what you've been doing. How do you think that talk a little bit about some of the sales and marketing and entrepreneurship? I mean, you've got this role now. Has that experience helped you kind of maybe reimagine or innovate kind of what you're doing at United?
But I think from a sales and marketing perspective, because I've been an audience, I've been on the audience side before. I kind of understand what kind of information would be important to someone that's standing in front of the customer. When you've got an employee that actually has to physically face a customer or take phone calls, they are the brand of the company, and they need to be knowledgeable. And I've been in that role, and so I think that probably helps me understand when I'm thinking about messaging certain information to that audience. But I really think from the entrepreneurship side, I spent a couple of years in app development, and when we did that, we had a ton of data. We could target all of our marketing campaigns based on data attributes. We know we want to reach this person and this age group and this demographic. And then once they're in the app, we had all of this rich data about how long they spent on different screens and how long it's been since their last login and what resonated the most. And so you have all of this data. And I thought those kinds of things, they are in direct parallel of what we have on our employees, and we don't necessarily leverage it. And that's true as just kind of an internal communication industry. From what I've uncovered with colleagues that work in the industry, is we're so busy sometimes just getting the information, packaging it, and getting it out, um, that we're not necessarily taking advantage of all the rich data that we have about our employees. So I think that's one thing that I'm excited about that we're doing, is really understanding where people work, what their role is, how long they've been with the company. We have all of this rich data that we house on employees, and most companies do. And now we're bringing that into our intranet, we're bringing that into our email and our newsletter strategy, and eventually will provide us the opportunity to do dynamic content and digitally personalized experiences just within an internal communication capacity.
So I heard about all the innovation going on, but take me back a couple steps. How did your team uncover that opportunity? Sort of set it up for us a little bit. What the problem maybe that you were seeing that was manifesting to say, hey, we've got to take this into the 21st century. Talk a little bit about that, and then now, you know with having such a diverse workforce, you mentioned from the pilot to the front lobby worker, can you walk us through maybe how you got to your strategy, to and what your plan is to be able to do that? I know a lot of our listeners, they want to compare what are other people doing to tackle this problem.
As I first came into United, one of the kind of the problems where it was I came in at a time when we were replatforming our intranet, and I believe our intranet, a strong intranet for any company, especially a large company, is foundational, right? That's your one source of truth. And in doing that, my team, we had the ability to help the migration path and understand how we would use that intranet. And so we set up special sections for the diverse audiences we serve. And that was a great first step. In addition, we were using Outlook as our email platform, and we had a good amount of distribution lists in our global distribution list, but what we didn't necessarily have was the ability to provide dynamic content, responsive templates. We definitely, I think, most internal communicators can relate. Sometimes you have to be scrappy and you have to make it work with what you've got, and we did. And I was so proud of the team to to provide a very professional internal communication look and feel, coupled with this new intranet. Um, but what we were still missing was capitalizing on the employee data, the measurement, understanding what was resonating, and being able to make smart decisions to get better. And I think that happens for a lot of us. I work side by side with our PR team and our social teams, and they have very mature measurement capabilities, and they report out on success metrics like impressions and overall social sentiment, and that's where I see us going, because I believe that internal communications is very much the same way. We are now measuring open rates, we're measuring clicks, we're measuring page visits, and then most recently we just started adding in some knowledge check questions or some fun survey questions into our newsletters, just to see what kind of engagement we get, almost like a marketing click funnel, right? First you get the click, then you get the view, then you get the engagement, and I believe that really is going to drive overall more engagement and lift internal communication and that employee readiness.
Now, you had talked about developing, an app. Talk to me. Do you have any tips on, another question we get from listeners is how do I pull people into my communication and not just push them to channels? Any ideas on adoption? Do you guys have a mobile app? How are you pulling people in? And is there some secret there with knowing, what the data is saying?
I think that's a great question, Sarah. I love technology. I have that background, and that's kind of where I get on fire for this kind of thing. Um, we I believe you have to reach your employees where they are, similar to the way you would when you're marketing a product. Uh, and that's not always easy. So we have a push pull strategy, and I think that's been very common throughout my experience. So, uh, like I said, we have this foundational intranet. Our intranet runs what we call an activity stream, which is very much like a social media feed of employee communications. Some of it's operational, some of it's engagement, some of it even is external. So it brings in some of the stories that you might be seeing in the news. Uh, but to expect that our employees go there every day, like I would love for them to, is naive, right? All of our folks out there have a job, and checking the internet first thing in the morning may not be on their list of things to do. And that's why we also couple that with the push of a newsletter every week. And that newsletter gives a small snippet of these stories and then pushes them right back to the internet, that foundation of truth. And that's been very helpful. Uh, and I but it's not perfect. And so then you start thinking about what other ways can we reach our frontline? What other ways can we reach our employee audience? Just because you introduce a new channel doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to solve your internal communication problem. I don't think internal communication is ever perfect. I think it's always just finding ways to get better. And a mobile app does reach those folks that are potentially out in the field, maybe not in front of a computer all the time, and using push notifications with those apps, giving easier access to content. All of that is helpful. But sometimes that's just another piece in your channel strategy puzzle. So there's other things like SMS, right? Short messaging, text messages, or even in certain areas, we have digital employee information display screens in break rooms. So maybe they're on break and they see this slideshow of employee information that we want to make sure that they know about. And then, I mean, as rudimentary as print, for large campaigns, we still print, we still send posters, we still send table tents, not nearly as often as we used to, obviously, in the new world of the pandemic, but sometimes that's also helpful to help reinforce employee information and communication that you need them to.
Hmm. So it sounds like what I'm hearing you say is you took stock kind of what you had, what is it measuring? And then I remember in our prep call you had mentioned actually going to each of the positions and seeing what their day was like. If I'm getting started here and looking at my strategy, my channel digital channel strategy for 2021, how do I even know what to pick?
No, I think you're absolutely right. So when I think about reaching a diverse workforce, especially one that's geographically diverse, that's diverse in function, there's kind of two things that I'm really a big believer in. Now, the first, you're right, is getting out and shadowing and understanding your audience. And so I'm a big believer in knowing your audience. When I came to United, I came from outside the aviation industry, and so I had a lot to learn. And so yes, you spend time out with your front line. You shadow. You understand the job. You understand when are the busy times, when are the slow times, when are they open to receive information, and when is it just not the right time for you to try to get them more communication. uh, and in my world, that was very different for each group. So while I have reservation agents that sit in front of a computer and serve customers, email may work better than for my flight attendant who's 25,000 feet in the air, taking care of and making sure our passengers are safe. And so email may be one way to try and reach them, but we also have um, those break room screens, like I mentioned. There's actually an app that's on that houses information for them from an operational standpoint. And so these are the things that you have to think about when you're creating a channel strategy. What are the differences between your work groups? The other one is one that I learned pretty early in my career, and that's uh, really involve your leaders. So I I fundamentally believe the most important message that you receive, that I receive, that anyone receives while at work is the message that your immediate manager, your leader tells you. That's the one you're going to listen to, and that's the one that you're going to follow if you're looking to do the best job possible. And so, failing to involve those leaders is a miss. You can publish articles, you can make videos, you can send newsletters, but that leader is the best tool. And so we really consider things like leader notices or weekly briefing documents or targeting leaders to help with the most complex subject matter to be really, really instrumental in getting driving a message through those audiences.
Well, talk to me about, everybody wants to hear what about your story in 2020? Because everyone has such a unique story. It was such a turbulent year. Talk to me a little bit about that and maybe what you uncovered, what learnings you had that's influencing your strategy now for 2021. Because our listeners, they're tired and there's a bit of a fatigue here. And one of the things I hear them say is, gosh, what we did 6 months ago now doesn't work now. People are tired of the Zoom call or the virtual meet. Talk to me a little bit about your journey and then what are you getting ready to do in 2021?
Absolutely. So I know you're tired. I'm tired. I believe this has been one of the most difficult years to be in internal communications. It's also been one of the most exciting times to be in internal communication because we're being looked at like never before. We're getting the spotlight like never before. People are seeing our importance, and it's a fantastic time to be on this side of the communication world. So it's no secret COVID-19 rocked the aviation world, right? International all travel is down, and we, along with our other competitors, took heavy hits, and it was been a very, very difficult year. But on the internal communication side, we've never been busier, right? And I think that that's true for a lot of folks that I've talked to in this practice. Um, on our side, even though we had very low load factors, very few people were traveling, we had to pivot to talk about cleaning regimens and new partnerships with Clorox and the Cleveland Clinic. We had to constantly stay up to date about entry requirements, and now it's all about testing, this kind of test and that kind of test, and how many hours before you fly do you need a test. All of that information has to be shared with the employees, the same that has to be shared with the customers. So we were very nimble, we were flexible. Our team immediately transitioned to Microsoft Teams to do all our collaboration and our meetings, and then we stood up new channels that we had to. in the beginning, like a dedicated entry requirements page because they were changing so fast, like a COVID-19 uh, newsletter that was just dedicated to new things that were coming out about the pandemic, and that was getting filled up much more quickly, and it was becoming overwhelming because there was still other information that we had to communicate. So we had to take that out and give it its own twice weekly newsletter for a long time. I'm glad to say we don't have to do that now, but in the beginning, that's the way it was. Um, we we continue to have a lot to communicate about, but I think we've gotten into a better cadence. Um, but you're not wrong. There's only so many times that you can say due to the pandemic, due to COVID-19, and unfortunately, I think we see the kind of the light at the end of the tunnel. I think we're going to have a much brighter 2021, but right now we're still in it, and we have to remember that for a variety of the way that you message, we have to be sensitive. This is not only impacting our business; this is impacting people's lives outside of the business. So I think a lot of our work maybe changed, but I feel a lot of that work is coming back now and becoming more like what it was. So we're doing new technology enhancements for our customers to help them in the travel world during the pandemic, and that's exciting. We're seeing press releases go out about new digital products for our customers. On our side, we educate our employees, and so I think what this year has done for us, as terrible as it's been to the industry and the world, is really remind folks that internal communication is incredibly important. And so that's really led us to our investigation and our digital innovation that we're seeing for 2021. And 2021, like I said, we replatformed our intranet. Now we're bringing in all of that good employee data so that we can provide that dynamic experience. We just redesigned all of our email templates into a measurable and responsive design with a far new, fresh look and feel, and uh, even some new surveying tools and things like that. And then our next step is to do the same thing. We're bringing in that PeopleSoft data, and that allows us to target down even more and overall inspect. Is there an area of the company that this is resonating with more? Is there content type that's resonating more? Can I do more of that? If there's an area of the business that's suffering and really not engaged, how can I work with those leaders to bring those folks back in and keep them informed?
I can imagine our listeners. I mean, they're going to be salivating at, I want to go work with Steven. I mean, they want to get there. The issue that we're having, and maybe you can shine light on this, is they are struggling with, I have all this work to do. I know I'm supposed to be tying this stuff to business objectives and metrics and showing my ROI and, you know, deal, polishing the nuances of building the relationships with leadership. I mean, this feels like so much work, so heavy. Can you coach us a little bit on how did you get there? How are you leading your team to be able to get this work done, but to be strategic so that you can get the technology and get into that sweet spot of innovation?
Well, what I would say is we're not there yet, and like I said, I think you're always growing in this field. But you're right. Like in internal communications, it sometimes feels like just write package send, and so you have to be very diligent about blocking off the time to think about the strategy, and then you've got to really understand it. You have to dedicate a resource or resources to the investigation part, and it's not just, in our case, not just one team. I've been very lucky that my leadership has empowered me and trusted me enough to let me kind of take a leading role in technology investigation and overall implementation. And I do that with my partners in digital technology. I do that with my partners in creative service. And I do that with the support of my most senior leaders in the corporate communications organization. Uh, and I also do that by trusting those that work for me and those that work around me, and trusting that they're doing fantastic work, and I don't necessarily need, and this is part of just who I am as a leader, I don't need to inspect every single thing around me all the time because I know I have great people around me and I know that they function at such a high level that I can take that time away and give some thought to digital strategy.
So, to walk me through kind of this investigation process a little bit. If people are going down the road, all right, I've got my time blocked out. I'm looking at what our team needs. How do I find how did you guys find out what's out there? How are you finding the new tools and tech? Tell me a little bit about that process and how do you conduct that research and those meetings to figure out, what's the best fit?
I think there's a lot of great resources out there. For instance, this podcast is out there. That's a great resource. There's internal communication websites and consulting companies. There's a ton out there if you go searching for it. But I think the way that I did it is I took a hard look at what I felt like we were lacking, and I started researching within the industry, and I started talking to colleagues that work at other companies in internal communication, asking what they're doing. Uh, and then I worked directly with our creative services team and our digital technology team to identify um, really uh, really identify the requirements of what I wanted to solve. And so I was able to write a list of requirements of if I were going to implement a new technology, a new email platform, a new app platform, what are those requirements? And then I took those requirements and I took them to my entire team and we reviewed them because I'm a big believer in collaborative think and making sure that everyone feels like they're a part because there are things that I miss, right? And it was so much better to have the entire team involved. And then we took those and we went and found kind of the best in class internal communication technology providers and took them to an RFP, a request for a proposal. And that's kind of where we are. We've done demos and I've had sandboxes to play in and I've been able to see and match those directly up against the requirements. Uh, and then even had the opportunity to reach out to folks that I know that use some of this technology, maybe in other companies, and that kind of thing really helps you kind of decide or develop that technology roadmap. And I would say that's a very important thing. If you're a communicator and you know you have a problem, uh, consider a technology roadmap, not a magic bullet just to solve everything at once, because that's not how it works. Even though that's kind of how we all want it to work, um, find out what your biggest need is and chase that, and then put on your roadmap how you're going to evolve. Because it takes time. It takes time to implement. It takes time to use new technology right, and then it takes time to get that measurement to make sure that you continually improve.
I love that tip of collaboration because then everybody kind of goes shoulder to shoulder into this. And sometimes I think that's a misstep. You go find a shiny new toy and then you somehow magically get the CFO to buy off on it. And then now the team doesn't want to use it. And now you got a problem. So I love that first step of making sure that everyone's got that buy-in before you go down the road of even shopping. So that's awesome. Talk to me about the metrics and the data. What are you now capturing? How are you advancing that? Give me some insight into the data world.
So we are doing some capture, and we will continue to get better. Right now, on our email platform and newsletter platform, we are capturing what you would expect, right? Unique opens and clicks. We can also get things like platform, so I can see a significant portion are opening on mobile or desktop. Uh, we can get more granular, so time of day that they're opening, and this lets us test: do we need to send things earlier in the day? Is there a better day to send? Um, we also we have pulse surveys, and communication questions are embedded into kind of our pulse culture survey, and so we can track that. Uh, and then we also have the ability to add in these kind of knowledge check questions or fun questions to seek engagement, like I mentioned. So, like, what's your favorite holiday side dish, or what's your New Year's resolution, and just kind of fun things to give them a break from the constant business. But then ultimately on the back end, what's very interesting now that we've brought in this data is that I can go through and I can see, well, how much of this audience is frontline that's open to this versus how much is management. Uh, Are these people in Chicago, or are they in San Francisco, or are they in Newark, New Jersey? I can go through that and I can get better idea uh, of those kinds of things that I couldn't do before. And that will continue to get better. And hopefully, as we report out, we can couple that data with our intranet site visits. And then even more so, we can couple all of that with our press release data and our social data. And so now you've got this 360 view of a major project. How did it resonate internally? How did it resonate externally? And how can we use that to get better next time?
Circle Broadcast is a proud member of the Internal Comms Pro Collective. During trying times, you can't afford to have remote employees in the dark grasping for information. Now, did you hear all the tech tips Stephen is referencing? If you too want that 360 view of your employees, consider using Circle Broadcast cross-channel employee communications. Circle Broadcast makes it infinitely easier to ensure employees are seeing the right message at the right time on the most convenient channel. Put Circle Broadcast on your technology roadmap. To learn more, visit circle.com/ICP. That's CERKL.com/ICP. Now, in this next part, Stephen talks about how to get budget for your technology roadmap, the tech must-haves that should go on your roadmap, and how to get adoption when introducing a new technology to your employees. And we end with the one mistake that still haunts Stephen to this day. Now let's jump back in. I love the 360 view. So again, I know what our listeners, I know the next question out of their mouth. How are you getting the budget for all of this technology?
Well, budget, I think, is such an interesting question. I think I was taught very early in my career, uh, when I was a team of, when I had one person reporting to me, of show value, ask for budget, not the other way around. And I think internal communications has been showing value for a long time, but even more so in this last kind of 12-month period, that's really been spotlighted. So a lot of companies invest when they have money to invest, they invest in the customer experience, and rightfully so. I've grown up in companies that are all about the customer, and spending that money on the customer is the right thing to do. I think what we're seeing now is that we're realizing that all the employees, as they stand in front of the customer, as they talk to the customer, as they create that customer experience, they are the brand, and we have to invest more in getting them ready and keeping them ready to create that experience. And so we showed value. We've been showing value. We have a leadership team that's in support of seeing our enhancement. We have operational leaders of all the different functional areas that want to see communication get better for their employees. And that's going to raise culture, that's going to raise customer experience. And ultimately, with that kind of argument, when you can say, if you help us get better tools, we can become more effective. Uh, we gained buy-in from the highest levels of our organization. And I think that's, you show value and then you gain buy-in.
So I'm going to dive into the weeds just a little bit more on this show value. Coach me on how are you doing that? Is this formal reports, presentations? How are, when you say show value, how do I do that?
It's funny. I think yes, right. All of those things. You show what you can show with the tools and the data that you can get. But I think in in lieu of having all of that rich data, and a lot of internal communication folks don't, it becomes about the relationships with the senior leaders of the audiences that you reach. And so develop those relationships with the directors, with the VPs, with the senior VPs, and help to realize their vision of communication for their part of the company, and then you have them as an advocate. So I have a VP who's passionate about communication, and I help him write a weekly message to his organization. And he loves that part of staying connected to his audience. Uh, he's passionate about making sure that they have the right information to serve the customer. And so, in doing that, when I turn around and say, I want to get better, he's an advocate and can champion that alongside me, not necessarily with the data, or maybe he has the data. Maybe he says, you know what, I was out in town halls and we have audience that don't feel like they know the things that they should know. How can we get better? And now he's on the same side as me to try to find new innovative tools to reach his people because he cares about his people and he cares about the company. So it's a combination of I think soft skills, soft relationships, and then data when you have it.
Definitely an art and a science to this industry for sure. Talk to me. Okay, so I get the technology, I get the next thing on my roadmap. Dive in a little bit about that process of how do I successfully kind of socialize that and onboard employees into a new tech. Talk to me about kind of the testing, process. Coach us a little bit. If I do get a new technology, what's some things to look for? What's maybe some mistakes you've seen happen in embedding something like that into the organization?
Sure. I think that's interesting because it can be incredibly difficult. I know that when I look at new technology, I look at it through the lens of my background, and I love technology, and so introducing something new and innovative and fun to me is easy and a no brainer. And why would we need to take any steps to make something so intuitive adopted? And then you actually bring it in and you don't understand why your audience is complaining, or why your audience isn't resonating with your audience. So uh, I, I would say the way that I did it when I first arrived at United, I had all of these communicators that were kind of brought in through this reorg, and we were centralizing the strategy. And in one of our groups, I had moved through what I had thought was the change process, but I had some pushback from our senior leaders, and they said, "No, we can't change the way we do things until we talk to our audience, until we inform them of these changes, until they understand, that your newsletter is now going to centralize everything once a week, that they need to visit the intranet, that they're no longer going to get single emails all day, every day, the way that they've done for the last 10 years. And so we set up learning sessions with the leaders. We set up a beta test group. And so we continued on with our old strategy as we tried the new strategy with a certain subset of agents, just I think a couple hundred agents. I physically went out and held focus groups where we just let folks talk about how they felt about the information that they received. Was it too much? Was it too little? Uh, and then ultimately, we had to make some compromises in the strategy that we thought we were going to launch to match the need of the audience. And so, yes, we have this centralized newsletter. Yes, we have this centralized intranet system. And we have this push pull strategy. But in addition, we've added on emergency communications because that's what they had been used to. We added on important news articles being pushed in the moment when it's necessary. Uh, and then that was important to help bridge what was in the past and what will be and what is in the future. Uh, and so I think that's important, is that you educate the leaders. Beta tests, I think, are great. Being flexible, not being married to the strategy as you envision it in your mind. Um, I think we all like to get this idea of what we're going to do, and it's going to be so exciting and so fantastic. And if you fail to really engage your audience in it before you make these massive changes, uh, you run the risk of making some really big mistakes.
Okay, so I want before we wrap up here, I got just a couple more questions. So, and I'm not looking for a specific list of tools, but if I'm looking at developing my technology roadmap in 2021, what types of technology is out there that's coming, that's new, that hey, you need to make sure if I'm going to have bottom of the barrel kind of thing, what should I be looking for? What kind of technology that you've seen that maybe you could speak to that I need to be aware of to kind of up my game here in my role?
That's a really good question. I think so. There's a lot of different things out there, and knowing your audience, you've got to decide what's right for you. So I fundamentally think you have to have the foundational intranet. If you have an intranet that's not organized well, that's not searchable, that isn't easy to navigate, you should start there because that's the foundation. I also think email is not dead. Email is a huge and powerful tool that we joke about sometimes as internal communicators, oh, well, we'll just send another email, but really, email is foundational as well. And so I don't think that the industry, the internal communications industry, is abandoning that. So if you find ways to make your email distribution better, there's some fantastic email tools out there, from template design to engagement, social engagement within the email, and then the overall tracking. From a new and innovative kind of technology, I definitely think mobile app is still there. I know mobile apps have been around a long time, but using a mobile app and using it in a dynamic way to provide a dynamic experience, I'm highly in favor in. Using the push notification feature and the login feature, the facial recognition or the thumbprint recognition, I think integrating those kinds of things. If your employees all have smartphones, the whole world does now, and so if you're not meeting the same kind of experience that they're getting on their other apps that they use personally, you're not going to get nearly the kind of effectiveness of your employee app. I think in some cases, text messages are beneficial for certain work groups, not for everybody, but definitely for some. I've seen some really exciting things on desktop notification software. So if you have a workforce that is constantly on their computer, there's some really interesting software out there that will give you pop-ups or little tickers across the bottom, embedded videos. I think that's exciting. Uh, and I think definitely we've seen our leaders dabble in podcasts. We've seen them dabble in video. I've dabbled in, and we've brought in animated video services to do little 15 to 30-second informationals that can be a little more fun than just another written message. I think I think infographics are something that we should play with and use sometimes when they make sense. Not everything is an infographic, but infographics are visual. And then I think it's just going to be exciting to see what comes next. There's I really thought by now I would have seen more internal social. I've seen things like the Facebook Workplace and different kind of social models. I have yet to really get deep into that or watch a company get deep into that. And I'm not sure if it's because work is different than personal, and that's just not the way that an employee mind works, or if it's just too young in its maturity and we'll get there. So I'm definitely keeping an eye on corporate social.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see, plus what comes out due to, the turbulent year and the need and the demand. I mean, you make a great point. Employees are now demanding the same or better experience than they're used to, when they are, doing Amazon shopping and Hulu and Pandora and Netflix and all these things know me. Why doesn't, my company, know me? There definitely that expectation. I think that added pressure for this industry for sure. So, last question, give me best idea you've executed and that worked really well. And then I want to know the worst one because those are the best stories and the biggest learnings. So often our industry has to put on the polish. And this is a show where it's like, all right, it's just me. We're sitting out here on the back porch. Tell me, the biggest failure you ever had so that I don't make the same mistake.
So I'll tell you the best idea is um, is also the most simple. So I shared earlier that when I arrived, that we had all these communicators kind of come together in this new team, and I'm proud that I was given the opportunity to help centralize the strategy. When I arrived, all of our communicators were doing what they had done before for the groups that they served. So we had, I think, over 20 email boxes. We had different newsletters on different days, different formats. Some people were sending PDFs. Some people were sending just straight regular emails. And so it made it very difficult for us to have a cohesive team that could support each other. And as we brought them all together, as we started discussing what we wanted to do, there was one specific thing that came out was, well, let's just first start by centralizing a mailbox. Let's have one mailbox so that anytime any employee gets it from this mailbox, they know that it's company information. And so we brainstormed and we talked and we came up with this in the know. Are you in the know? In the know at united.com is the way that we reach our frontline. And anytime that pops up in their mailbox, they know that's going to be company information that they need to know to do their job. And it's It's silly, it's little, but it actually becomes part of the nomenclature, part of the culture, right? And so people say, "Did you see that in the know? Are you staying in the know?" We created a logo that was dedicated to in the know, and then that's kind of how we talk about things, and kind of become that in the know team. And like I said, it's not fancy technology. It's not new and innovative. It's just being consistent and really finding a consistent way to drive that information.
Give me a failure.
Oh, the failure. So I think the biggest failure that I had was so I think not taking the time to stakeholder appropriately. When I came in to United, I made one specific mistake that really kind of haunts me and that I had to really change. So when I came in part of our organization, we had these things called bulletins, which to me looked just like an article, just like anything else that we would write. Right? It was called a bulletin. It was numbered with a special number. It was archived in a special way. It was formatted in this effective date and this very rigid structure. And to me, with kind of a journalism background, it didn't read to me like a story I would want to read. And it was sent out alongside all of these other articles that were very much the same as to what I was used to, but these bulletins really troubled me. And so, as we kind of centralized the strategy, as we created this new newsletter, I said, guys, we're not going to have the difference between articles between articles and bulletins. We're just everything's an article, and write it in journalistic style. If I read the first line, I want to know what the message is about, and that's what we're going to do. And I felt like I had talked to all the right people, and we pulled the trigger. And the first week we did that, the first week there was no bulletins, there was just articles. Immediately I started getting phone calls. And they said, "Hey, what's the deal? Where are these bulletins at? We need these bulletins." And I said, "Well, I don't understand. All the information's there. I didn't change the information. We're still putting it out there. It's just not called a bulletin." And so they were like, "Look, we need to talk to you." And so I had all of these leaders around, and they had brought me in, and I was trying to kind of defend our new strategy. And they said, "Look, a bulletin is very specific. It's made to bridge the gap when we make a change in a manual." And I was like, "Whoa, whoa, whoa, tell me about these manuals. I don't, I'm from outside. I don't know about these manuals." And so it turns out that an article is one thing, but a bulletin specifically is can be inspected by the FAA. It covers us anytime we make a manual change or a change in our manual. And so I didn't know that. I didn't think to ask about that. I didn't know that I was potentially putting our company at risk from an investigation from the FAA if we don't follow this protocol. And I was embarrassed that I didn't appropriately stakeholder. I felt a little defeated that I had brought this strategy and implemented it and had this huge miss. And so I had to immediately kind of turn and say, "I apologize. That was not the intention. I'm only trying to get the right information in the right way. We'll immediately bring back bulletins." And we've done work to make them very clear and concise and change the way that necessarily they're delivered, but still meet the need. It's the little things that you think you're just making things better, but if you don't do your homework, you can really, really cause some problems. And so I think that's probably the one that haunts me, the one that I still remember.
Well, I thank you for being so vulnerable to share that. And I think it speaks to the complexity of this industry and of internal communications. Again, so many people want to equate it to marketing or whatever, but I think there's so many more nuances and complexities that happen to to your point, to your story. So oh, well, I can't thank you enough for letting us kinda take a little peek into the 2021 and what you're gonna be doing and all the innovation, and it's such great coaching. If our listeners wanted to follow up with you, are you okay with them kind of connecting with you via LinkedIn? Would that be all right?
Absolutely. I'd love to. I'm strong in the LinkedIn community. I love to grow my network, and I love to meet like minded people in the internal communication field.
Well, thanks so much for being on our show today, and I look forward to following up with you maybe mid-year, seeing how it's going.
That sounds fantastic. I've enjoyed it.
Well, there you have it, folks, the technology roadmap to take your channel strategy to new heights. We have all of Stephen's tips and a great roadmap template that you can download for free. We'll provide the link in today's show notes. Stay with us as our journey to uplevel your internal communications to the pro level continues.
Internal Comms Pro, the podcast, is produced by the Internal Comms Pro Collective and proudly supported by the Circle Broadcast Suite, an entire suite built for internal communicators. Learn more at circle.com. And don't forget to visit www.internalcommspro.com/show notes for our free resource guides. Thank you for listening.